Then you have this from Billy Bush, who of course is a great entertainment reporter in particular, weighing in on the fact that Romy Reiner, who is, I think, only 19 or 20, she's the one who found her parents with their throats slit and bodies stabbed multiple times. And there's new information in this soundbite. Listen here from Billy Bush.
It began as a Hollywood love story and ended in heartbreak no one expected. The Reiners were everything the world admired. Rob Reiner, the legendary filmmaker behind timeless classics, his wife Michelle, the quiet heart of the family. Their children grew up surrounded by fame, creativity, and love. But behind the smiles and red carpets, tension had been building for years, until one December night, it finally erupted into a tragedy that left Hollywood shaken. Now their son, Nick Reiner, stands accused of a crime that fractured his own family, while his sister Romy insists there's more to the story than anyone knows. Secrets, guilt, loyalty, and legacy collide in a haunting Hollywood mystery. The truth about what happened inside the Reiner home remains twisted, unresolved, and unclear. For years, Rob's son Nick Reiner faced public struggles that kept the family under constant pressure. For years, behind closed doors,
I got this from a friend who lives in the community. I heard that the son, Nick, went into his parents' house, stabbed both mom and dad, and that the daughter, I guess, lives on the property or at the house or in the back house, and that she found them, and that the mom was still alive, and apparently she called the ambulance and went in the ambulance with her mother.
No one imagined how tense things would become before everything collapsed. Now investigators are revisiting old statements Nick once made about his father, words that suggest the trouble may have been building long before that dramatic night. The moment that changed everything for Rob and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner came on December 13th, 2025, a date meant for laughter and celebration. That evening, they attended a lavish Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, surrounded by friends, familiar faces, and holiday cheer. Yet beneath the sparkle, something felt off. Witnesses later said a heated argument erupted between Rob and Nick. Voices rose, faces tightened, and the mood shifted fast. Guests exchanged uneasy looks as the room turned from festive to confrontational. Several people described Nick as acting strangely, saying his behavior unsettled everyone. Still, Nick now insists he is not guilty of anything that happened that night at all.
And the sister, if you see the pictures of Romy, the sister, I guarantee you she knew. And again, reportedly she was the one who called the cops and said, check out.
He insists the real problem started with Romy Reiner, claiming she was the one who turned everything upside down. According to Nick, he's been unfairly blamed, and now he says he's ready to tell his side of the story. Something about that night didn't sit right, and by the next morning, whispers from the Christmas party were spreading fast. One guest claimed Nick had everyone on edge, a phrase that quickly echoed through Hollywood. Investigators began piecing together what may have happened in the tense hours before everything took a serious turn. Rob Reiner didn't avoid the situation. He confronted it directly, trying to calm Nick instead of brushing it aside. Michelle stayed close, steady, and loyal through every moment. The two moved as a unit, doing everything they could to keep the night from spiraling. When they chose to leave, it wasn't dramatic. They departed quietly, guiding Nick away from cameras and rumors, appearing like parents determined to protect their family from public fallout.
Michelle died in the ambulance, but had enough time to tell her daughter that it was Nick, their son, who stabbed them, and that's why they figured it out so quickly and he's in custody.
They weren't angry. They looked heartbroken, desperate to hold everything together. But behind that calm exterior, Nick's expression told a very different story. He was overheard saying, "I'm not the one causing all this. It's Romy stirring everything up." The comment stunned several guests and quickly became one of the most repeated lines from the night. Later that evening, Rob took a call from his friend Eric Idle, and the tone couldn't have been more different. The two laughed, joked, and talked through creative plans, especially the long-awaited Spinal Tap 2 project. According to Eric, the conversation focused on ideas and excitement for the future, not family turmoil. Rob sounded upbeat, confident, and fully engaged. What few people knew was that earlier that week, Rob had confided in a close friend, his voice shaking, saying, "Sometimes I don't know how to reach Nick anymore." That quiet admission now feels chilling. Meanwhile, Romy reportedly told someone close to her, "Nick's blaming me for things I didn't even do." The tension between the siblings had clearly been simmering long before that night, and now every word added another layer of uncertainty. When the Reiners returned home in the early hours of December 14th, something deeply unsettling unfolded inside their elegant Brentwood house, a moment that would shake everyone who knew them. The Los Angeles District Attorney later confirmed the tragic situation occurred before sunrise, though the exact timing remained unclear. Around 3 p.m., Romy Reiner, who lived across the street, went to check on her parents after failing to reach them. The instant she stepped inside, she felt it. Something was terribly wrong. Moments later, she was on the phone calling for help. Paramedics and LAPD officers arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the still Brentwood air.
Romy's 28, FYI, but that's a critical piece of the prosecution's case right there, you guys. If it's called a dying declaration, it comes into court even though it's hearsay because it's an out-of-court statement by someone.
When authorities entered the home, they found Rob and Michelle unresponsive, triggering immediate panic and confusion. The house was quickly sealed off as detectives launched a full investigation, treating it as a serious domestic situation from the very beginning. What stunned everyone was what they didn't find. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. Every door and window was secure. Nothing appeared disturbed. That detail shifted the entire case, suggesting whoever was involved didn't need to break in. They were either already inside or welcomed willingly. As investigators pressed on, they questioned neighbors along the quiet tree-lined street, yet something didn't add up. No one heard anything that night. No alarms, no shouting, no sounds of distress, just silence. A silence that made the situation even more unsettling. Neighbors described the Reiner home as peaceful and tightly secured, the kind of place where even minor noise would travel. That's what made the silence so disturbing. One investigator reportedly said it felt unnaturally silent. Then came another twist. Nick Reiner spoke out again, claiming, "I wasn't even there when it happened. Romy's hiding something. She knows more than she's saying." His words sent shockwaves through the case, but Romy strongly denied it. She told a close friend Nick was twisting the story and trying to shift blame. As detectives reconstructed the timeline, one thing became clear. Whoever moved through that Brentwood home that night knew it intimately. The calm wasn't peace, it was tension waiting to break.
But a dying declaration comes in over hearsay objections. So if Romy Reiner is actually going to take the stand and repeat that her mother told her as she lay dying that it was Romy's brother, Nick, oh my God.
According to police records, Nick left the Brentwood home shortly after the tragic event, around 4 a.m. on December 14th. Soon after, he appeared at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, walking in as if nothing was wrong. Hotel staff told investigators Nick seemed calm, polite, and composed overall that night. No shaking hands, no nervous glances, just a man checking in like anyone else. One employee recalled he smiled, asked about breakfast, and showed no tension. But hours later, after Nick checked out, detectives searched the room and found something that stopped them cold. Reports say investigators uncovered evidence inside that hotel room linking directly back to what happened at the Brentwood home. Their discovery placed Nick at the center of the investigation's timeline, tying his stay to the Brentwood events in a way that couldn't be ignored. His stay was unusually short, lasting just a few hours. Nick checked in, kept to himself, then left before sunrise. Later that day, surveillance footage captured him at a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue. Cameras showed him walking in, buying water, paying, and leaving. He didn't appear stressed. His expression stayed calm and unreadable. When reporters later asked about that morning, Nick said he had nothing to run from and insisted he did nothing wrong, adding that Romy knew what really happened. The comment ignited social media. Hours later, someone close to Romy claimed she broke down, saying Nick was lying again and trying to shift blame.
In all the pictures of Romy, you can see, at least I think I see in the eyes like a concern, like a pain. There's the absence of a joy that you see in the other brother's face. And then you see Nick, who looks deeply disturbed in every photo. He looks progressively disturbed, progressively more like a criminal.
By 9:15 p.m., police tracked Nick near Exposition Park. just steps from the University of Southern California campus. To investigators, it felt like the walls were closing in. To Nick, he said it was a misunderstanding taken too far. Everything about his calm behavior clashed with the chaos surrounding his name, and the truth was still nowhere in sight. Patrol cars surrounded the intersection in a tense but controlled operation that left bystanders frozen. Blue and red lights washed over the street as officers closed in on Nick Reiner. There was no chase, no shouting, no disorder. Nick remained calm, barely speaking, following every instruction. Within minutes, he was taken into custody without resistance. By night's end, detectives began connecting the pieces: a heated family argument, an eerily quiet house, no signs of forced entry, and a trail stretching across Los Angeles. All of it pointed to something larger than expected. Yet one chilling question refused to fade. What really happened inside the Brentwood home before sunrise? That was when the investigation took a sharper turn. Once the Reiner home was secured, forensic experts moved in to examine every corner in detail. They searched with precision, photographing rooms, collecting samples, studying each inch like detectives racing the clock. Inside the command center, investigators gathered around screens and maps, rebuilding the night minute by minute. The medical examiner then began a detailed time-of-event analysis. With no cameras inside the house and no digital timestamps, they relied purely on science. Subtle temperature changes, physical evidence, and faint traces left behind by whoever had been there. Every clue now carried enormous weight. Just as findings started to come together, Nick reportedly told detectives during questioning, "You're wasting time. I didn't do anything. Roy was there after me. Ask her." That statement threw the case into chaos. Roy, meanwhile, allegedly told her lawyer that Nick was twisting the truth again and trying to save himself. Forensics focused on rigor mortis and lividity, key indicators used to determine when the tragedy occurred inside the Brentwood home.
You know, you never know what goes on behind closed doors and how people are. And clearly you have a son there frustrated at not being able to effectively communicate with his own father for whatever reason. You know, that his father couldn't express himself in the way the kid needed.
The experts worked tirelessly piecing together what time and science could reveal. Yet even with all the data, one truth remained clear. What happened that night was tangled in more than physical evidence. It was trapped between two conflicting family stories that refused to align. Using forensic indicators, the medical examiner concluded Rob and Michelle Reiner likely passed away in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. That timeline matched what detectives suspected from the start. The tragedy unfolded deep in the night, during hours when the neighborhood slept, unaware anything was wrong. From there, the investigation narrowed sharply onto physical evidence. Forensic specialists examined the injuries and identified them as sharp force wounds, meaning they came from an object with a cutting edge, possibly a knife or similar tool. The injuries were inflicted at close range. Investigators said the person responsible had to be standing right next to the victims. It was a face-to-face act carried out within arm's reach, not from a distance. What shocked the forensic team wasn't just the type of injuries, but their pattern. The evidence didn't suggest a single moment or sudden burst. It pointed to a struggle that lasted longer than expected. Every expert who reviewed the findings said the same thing. The level of intensity was alarming. The report painted a dark, emotional picture of what may have unfolded inside that peaceful Brentwood home. This wasn't one instant of chaos. It appeared deliberate, unfolding step by step. One forensic specialist reportedly said it wasn't random and that whoever did it stayed until it was finished. When detectives shared this assessment with Nick, he reacted quickly, saying it wasn't him and insisting he didn't hurt them. He claimed Roy was there after he left and said she was the one investigators should question. His voice reportedly cracked, mixing fear and frustration. Roy, however, told a family friend in private that Nick was lying because he knew what really happened and was still there when everything fell apart. Despite the emotional accusations, investigators stayed focused. They couldn't afford assumptions. The evidence pointed toward intent. Whoever was involved didn't stop once events began. While science helped structure the timeline, the human story underneath only grew more complicated. Nick and Roy were locked in a battle of blame no one could yet untangle. After forensic reports were finalized, Nick Reiner found himself at the center of a storm. He was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for each parent. In California, that's the most serious charge possible, reserved for cases prosecutors believe were intentional and potentially planned. The courtroom atmosphere was electric from the start. Prosecutors then added special circumstances, citing multiple victims, raising the stakes even higher.
As of 2016, Nick had gone to rehab 18 times, which means he was, I think, 22 in 2016. And that means that in 7 years, he went to rehab 18 times.
That addition pushed the case into the highest legal tier possible. It wasn't just a dramatic headline. Those words changed everything about how the trial would unfold. With special circumstances in play, the potential penalties became extreme. If convicted, Nick could face life behind bars with no chance of parole. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office made their position clear. They believed the evidence was airtight. Their public statement sent shockwaves through the city, stating the forensic proof met every legal standard for such severe charges. Almost overnight, the Reiner case shifted from a heartbreaking family tragedy into one of the most explosive legal battles Los Angeles had seen in years. Even as the charges were announced, Nick refused to back down. Standing beside his attorney, he declared his innocence, insisting he didn't do it and claiming Roy had set him up. He said she had been twisting the story from the start. His words echoed through the courthouse, and reporters replayed the clip non-stop. Roy responded through her legal team, saying Nick was inventing stories to save himself and knew exactly what happened inside the house. The tension between the siblings was so intense that even prosecutors reportedly described the family dynamic as highly unusual. By then, detectives had their timeline locked, a clear sequence of events, a confirmed cause, no signs of forced entry, and Nick's movements tracked across Los Angeles. The case was tightening quickly. The stage was set for court, where every accusation and every piece of evidence would be examined. When Nick Reiner stood before a judge for the first time, the courtroom fell silent. The tension, the stillness, even his plain gray outfit made the moment feel heavy. This wasn't a routine hearing, it marked a turning point. On the morning of December 17, 2025, Nick was escorted into a Los Angeles courtroom under tight security for his initial appearance. Until that moment, the case had lived only in sealed reports and guarded updates. Now it was fully public. The whispers ended, and the legal battle officially began.
I'm not blaming their fame and wealth. As I just pointed out, I had a sister who was an addict, and we had no money. So it's not, it's not about that. Like, some people do come into the world with a different body chemistry. I really do believe that can lead them down a dark path.
The scene was locked down like a high-stakes movie set. No cameras, no live stream, no press footage. The court banned all broadcast coverage, keeping the atmosphere tense and controlled. Only a small group of reporters, attorneys, and court officials were allowed inside, eyes fixed on the doors, waiting for Nick to appear. The rules were strict, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Then, the doors opened. Nick Reiner entered, escorted by 2 deputies who led him straight to the defense table. His footsteps echoed through the silent courtroom. His face remained unreadable, though his eyes briefly flicked toward the gallery. One reporter later claimed he mouthed, "I didn't do this." That single moment ignited social media. As the judge read the charges, Nick stood still, hands clasped, occasionally shaking his head. When asked for his plea, he said firmly, "Not guilty." He added that he loved his parents and would never hurt them, insisting Roy knew the truth. It was the first time Nick had spoken publicly since his arrest, instantly transforming the quiet Brentwood mystery into a national courtroom drama. When Nick stepped into the courtroom that morning, what stood out wasn't his expression, but the harm prevention smock he wore. The pale, padded garment contrasted sharply with the polished wood and sharp lines of the courtroom. It drew silent reactions from the gallery. Reporters scribbled notes, guards exchanged brief glances. No one commented. The hearing moved forward as if the smock didn't exist. As proceedings began, the room fell completely still. Papers rustled. The clerk's voice echoed as the charges were read aloud. 2 counts of first-degree homicide. 1 for Rob Reiner, 1 for Michelle Reiner. The words were delivered without emotion. The law stated plainly. When asked if he understood his rights, Nick responded calmly, "Yes, Your Honor." It was the only time he spoke during the hearing. He showed no reaction, didn't look toward the gallery, and sat upright, focused, staring ahead as if bracing himself. Observers described him as unreadable, calm yet distant. When the charges were repeated, one journalist claimed he whispered, "I'm innocent. Roy knows it." Though barely audible, the rumor spread fast. Afterward, the focus shifted to scheduling. Nick's attorney requested more time before entering a formal plea, citing new evidence and statements. The judge agreed, resetting the arraignment to January 7, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. The courtroom remained silent, heavy with the weight of what was unfolding.
They did tough love. That's what he's saying here, that the parents said, we are not going to fund your life, your apartments, your landlord, your bills, until you get.
But beneath that calm surface, tension buzzed. Everyone knew this wasn't over. The next hearing promised revelations, and Nick's whispered claim about Roy had added a new layer to the mystery. By the end of that tense morning, one thing was clear. The case had only just begun. The silence inside the courtroom spoke louder than any headline, heavy with the sense that everyone had just witnessed the opening scene of a long legal war. After a few quiet minutes, attention shifted to who was standing beside Nick Reiner. His defense attorney wasn't an unknown public defender. It was Alan Jackson, one of the most formidable courtroom figures in California. The moment his name surfaced, the energy in the room changed. Jackson was no stranger to high-stakes trials. He had battled prosecutors in some of the most intense cases in the country, with past clients including Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Karen Reed. Hiring Jackson sent a message louder than any press release. Nick wasn't backing down. This wasn't a temporary legal move. It was a full-scale defense strategy. The signal was unmistakable. His team was preparing for a long, grinding courtroom fight that could stretch for months, even years. It showed they expected deep scrutiny, endless filings, and brutal legal battles over every piece of evidence. Outside the courthouse, reporters buzzed. When Jackson's name spread, one insider whispered that this was the kind of lawyer you hired when you were fighting for your life. Meanwhile, a source close to the Reiner family claimed Roy was stunned by Nick's high-powered defense, reportedly saying he was trying to look innocent by going big because he knew he was cornered. As the hearing ended, Nick exited the same way he had entered, silent, serious, flanked by deputies. He didn't look toward the press or react to shouted questions echoing down the hallway. No statements came from either side, just the low murmur of reporters processing what they'd seen. Within minutes, the courtroom emptied again, but outside, the story was heating up. By that afternoon, attention shifted to the new question: who was paying for Nick Reiner's powerhouse defense? The whispers began instantly. Legal insiders knew a case with 2 first-degree homicides and special circumstances could last years before trial. These cases demand elite experts, deep forensic work, and endless pre-trial motions. Costs like that could climb past $1 million before a jury was seated. That financial mystery quickly became the latest twist. Analysts ran the numbers and agreed this defense could exceed $1 million. Yet Nick had no recent acting work, no visible income, and no public deals to explain fees of that size.
And so when we're thinking about a person being inside, the real person being inside, I mean, what it has to take to do that to your own parents, reportedly after a heated argument at a party, that is sociopathic.
That gap between Nick's public finances and his courtroom costs sparked an immediate media frenzy. Speculation flooded social media within hours. Some insiders claimed money from the Reiner family estate might be paying the bills. Others questioned whether that was even legal while the estate remained unresolved. Legal experts quickly weighed in, calling it a legal gray area. In some cases, shared assets can be used for defense costs. In others, doing so can trigger bitter disputes or lawsuits from heirs. One legal expert said bluntly on a live panel that if Nick was using family funds, Roy could legally challenge every payment made to his attorney. Soon after, sources close to the family claimed Roy was furious, saying Nick was using money that didn't belong to him and that his father would never have allowed it. Nick pushed back through his legal team, insisting every dollar spent was legal and fully documented. He accused Roy of twisting the situation again. That response only intensified the debate, splitting public opinion. Inside the courtroom, however, none of the financial drama surfaced. The judge didn't ask, the prosecution didn't raise it, the defense stayed silent on funding. Outside, the arguments exploded. Some insisted everyone deserves the strongest defense possible, no matter the charge. Others were outraged by the idea that family-linked money could be shielding someone accused of destroying that same family. Inside the courtroom, proceedings remained calm and procedural. Outside, emotions ran hot. Media crews camped on the courthouse steps, and tension reportedly spilled into the family itself. Sources said not everyone close to the Reiners wanted Nick punished to the fullest extent. Some relatives were said to be pushing for compassion, hoping mental health treatment would be considered alongside criminal accountability. It underscored how complex the situation had become. This was no longer just about evidence and law. It was about family, guilt, and what justice truly should look like. None of those claims were officially confirmed. There were no filings, no public statements, no verified records. Rumors swirled, but the legal process moved forward steadily. Prosecutors remained firm. They said the forensic findings, Nick's movements, and the reconstructed timeline supported first-degree homicide charges. They stressed the act appeared deliberate and met California's highest legal standard for intent. Because of the special circumstances involving two victims, the stakes were absolute. If convicted, Nick faced only two outcomes: life in prison without parole, or permanent confinement with no return to freedom. There were no lesser options. This was the harshest path the system allowed. Outside the courthouse, the storm kept growing. New tips came in. Detectives continued tracking leads. Both sides quietly prepared for a long legal battle. Reporters claimed private investigators were being hired, and whispers about sealed evidence began circulating. Roy reportedly told someone close that she only wanted the truth, whatever it took. Nick's team fired back, insisting he was being unfairly targeted. Through his lawyer, Nick repeated he was not guilty, that he needed help, not hatred, and accused Roy of lying to protect herself. The fight was no longer just about guilt or innocence. It was about control, loyalty, and who the world would believe. On the surface, the case looked calm. Underneath, pressure was building fast, and it was clear Nick Reiner would not stay silent long.
Your dad's Rob Reiner. Sort of like, isn't it amazing? You got to learn that your dad is Rob Reiner. He did not seem to find it nearly as amusing as the interviewer kind of set him up to express. It looked like he looks like he was struggling with a lot of resentment. And again, it's armchair quarterbacking, but I feel like it's just jumping off of the screen in those interviews.
Within days, attention turned back to a statement Nick had made earlier. This time, it carried far more weight. His words reshaped how the case was viewed and sparked what many began calling his shocking revelation. In the statement, Nick spoke with raw honesty about his childhood, admitting he never truly felt close to his father, Rob Reiner. He said there was always distance between them, a gap that made him feel like he didn't quite belong. He explained that he loved his dad, but often felt like he was standing outside of Rob's world, watching from a distance. That confession sent shockwaves through those following the case. Publicly, Rob Reiner had long been seen as a devoted, hands-on father, successful, admired, and deeply involved in family life. He shared sports, dinners, and creative passions with his children, moments that became lasting memories. But for Nick, those connections never felt the same. He described himself as an observer rather than a participant, present in the room, but emotionally far away. People close to the family later said Rob did try. He wasn't intentionally distant, but a demanding career and long hours may have created gaps Nick struggled to bridge. From the outside, the Reiners appeared to be a perfect Hollywood family. Inside, Nick said something was missing. He shared that he was surrounded by love but couldn't feel it, as if it stopped short before reaching him. That sense of loneliness didn't arrive suddenly. It grew slowly over the years until it became part of who he was. Friends described Nick as introspective and withdrawn, often seeking approval that never fully came. This emotional backdrop added a new layer to the story, blurring the line between family tragedy and inner struggle. Nick's openness reframed him not just as a suspect, but as someone shaped by years of unspoken pain. As those feelings deepened, Nick drifted further from the family. Home no longer felt comforting, it felt heavy. He began searching elsewhere for escape and belonging. That search led to substance use. What began as experimentation grew to dependency he couldn't control. By 15, his situation had worsened enough that he entered rehabilitation for the first time. The Reiner family didn't hide from it. They sought help immediately, trying program after program, doctor after doctor. It wasn't a secret, it was a painful, public fight to save their son. Nick later admitted the substances were powerful and dangerous, trapping him in a cycle he couldn't escape. He believed he was in control, but in truth, it was controlling him. That honesty gave people a clearer view of how deep his struggle had gone. Nick's battle with addiction became a painful cycle, brief stretches of recovery followed by crushing relapses that drained hope each time. Just when things seemed to improve, another setback pulled him back under. His life grew increasingly unstable. He moved from Maine to New Jersey to Texas, never staying long. These weren't adventures, they were survival stretches marked by uncertainty, isolation, and struggle. Yet through all of it, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on their son, not once. They stayed present, showing steady love and patience even at his lowest points. They made calls, found specialists, and paid for treatment after treatment. Friends recalled Rob saying that if they stopped trying, Nick would stop believing he could change. That relentless hope defined how they faced everything. In interviews, Rob and Michelle spoke openly about Nick's fight. They didn't hide the truth or place blame. They poured everything they had into helping him heal, emotionally and financially. To them, it wasn't about image or failure, it was about love and the belief that one day Nick would find his way back. Those close to the family said their efforts never stopped, even when things felt hopeless. They refused to turn away, no matter how heavy it became. At one point, Rob tried a different approach, a deeply personal and creative one. Instead of keeping his work separate, he invited Nick into his filmmaking world. In 2015, father and son collaborated on the film Being Charlie, inspired directly by Nick's struggle with addiction and recovery. The story avoided easy messages and Hollywood gloss. It showed relapse, resistance, heartbreak, and the ongoing fight to improve. During production, something seemed to shift. For the first time in years, Nick showed focus and discipline. Working beside his father gave him structure and purpose. One crew member recalled that Nick seemed proud of what they were building together. For a moment, it felt like a new chapter had begun. Rob and Michelle allowed themselves to hope. For a short time, Nick appeared calmer and more grounded. Friends noticed Rob seemed lighter, almost relieved. He told one of them that the project saved both of them, at least for a while. The shared creative space reconnected father and son in ways therapy hadn't. But the peace was fragile. Not long after filming ended, Nick relapsed again, returning to the same destructive patterns. The cycle resumed. Stability gave way to confusion and exhaustion. Each relapse hit harder, draining Nick's spirit and leaving his parents worn down and unsure how many times they could keep going. Still, those who knew the family said Rob never believed Nick could recover. In the years leading up to the tragedy, concern within the family kept growing.
And he has been in and out of rehab himself, and now is posting, I guess he's clean and sober at the moment, and he's posting something like Mental Health Mondays posts on his Instagram.
What once felt manageable through rehab, therapy, and patience was becoming unpredictable. Even the most hopeful family moments grew tense and uncertain. Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner never stopped trying. They gave their son love, structure, and constant support. But, as many families learn, love doesn't always quiet fear. Those close to the family said fear had slowly become part of daily life. It wasn't just about whether Nick would stay clean. They began worrying about their own emotional limits and safety. The distance between Rob and Nick, the same gap Nick described years earlier, had grown heavier over time. It wasn't about blame, it was about two people trapped in a painful cycle of love mixed with guilt, hope tangled with disappointment. A friend said they never stopped loving him, but they began realizing love alone might not be enough. By the time the Christmas party arrived, tension had been building for years. The argument that night wasn't sudden, it was the final spark after a long buildup of frustration and exhaustion. Every rehab attempt, every late-night call, every difficult conversation added strain to a bond already stretched thin. That night, it finally snapped, according to someone close to the investigation. Nick later claimed the argument wasn't what people believed, insisting Romy twisted it and wanted blame placed on him. Romy reportedly told a friend Nick was rewriting history again, saying the family was scared of what he might do. Nick's feelings of disconnection, first rooted in childhood, never disappeared. They followed him into adulthood, shaping relationships, decisions, and relapses. He carried that emptiness like a shadow. Even moments that looked like progress were influenced by that distance, an invisible weight pulling at him and those around him. At the time the shocking loss of Rob and Michelle Reiner sent shockwaves across the world waited for a response. When the family finally spoke, their words landed with raw force. The first official statement came jointly from Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner. There was no legal language, no speculation, only heartbreak and truth. They described the loss as unimaginable, beyond words. The message focused on family, not fame. Rob and Michelle were remembered not as Hollywood figures, but as parents who brought light into every room and held their family together through chaos. The statement was deeply personal, a reminder that beneath headlines and courtroom drama was a family shattered beyond measure.
Even through their pain, Romy and Jake took a moment to thank the public for the overwhelming compassion they received. Messages of love, condolences, and shared memories poured in from around the world. Actors, directors, friends, and fans spoke about how Rob Reiner's work and Michelle Singer Reiner's warmth had touched their lives. Within that same message came a simple request: privacy. The family asked for space to grieve, to breathe, and to begin piecing their lives back together away from cameras and speculation. They didn't want public displays of sympathy. They wanted quiet time to mourn with dignity. Since releasing that statement, there have been no interviews, no press conferences, and no follow-ups. The family chose silence, not as a shield, but as protection for their peace. and perhaps for the truth still unfolding. Whispers followed the statement. Some outlets claimed Nick had tried to reach out from custody, hoping to speak with his siblings. An anonymous source alleged Roy responded through her lawyer, saying they needed distance and that it wasn't the time. The heartbreak, the silence, and the unresolved tension highlighted a painful reality. The Reiner family wasn't only mourning their parents, they were trying to survive a storm that had torn their world apart. In the days after the loss of Rob and Michelle, the family withdrew from public view. They chose to grieve away from headlines and noise, deciding this chapter belonged to them alone. A private memorial was held to honor their lives, attended only by those who truly knew and loved them. The service took place in a quiet, candlelit setting, surrounded by flowers and soft music. It wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about love, gratitude, and memory. Those who attended described it as tender and deeply emotional, filled with tears, soft laughter, and reflection. Only close family, lifelong friends, and a few trusted collaborators were present. There were no cameras and no statements afterward. One family friend said it wasn't a Hollywood farewell, it was a family one. Stories shared focused on simple moments, dinners, phone calls, jokes, and enduring love. Across Hollywood, grief spread quickly. Tributes poured in from the industry. Kathy Bates spoke emotionally about Rob's mentorship, saying he gave actors space to be brave and trusted them completely. Kate Hudson shared a heartfelt message, calling Rob a creative father figure to generations of performers. Nick Robinson remembered him as a mentor who never talked down to anyone, treating every collaboration with respect. Each tribute carried its own warmth, but they all echoed the same truth. Rob wasn't just a filmmaker, he was a builder of people. His sets felt safe, his leadership steady and kind, and his influence reached far beyond the screen. Even those who never met him shared how his films changed their lives, how stories like Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally taught them about connection, empathy, and the beauty of imperfection. As the industry mourned, one truth became clear. Rob's legacy wasn't measured in awards or box office numbers. It lived in the people he lifted and inspired. Though the loss felt overwhelming, his voice as both an artist and a human being would not fade. His storytelling reached far beyond Hollywood spectacle. It wasn't built on effects or noise, but on people, emotion, and honesty. Rob had a rare gift for turning ordinary moments into unforgettable art. His films became cultural landmarks, not because they shouted, but because they spoke directly to the soul. The Princess Bride remains a timeless favorite, cherished for its humor, romance, and sense of wonder. Stand By Me still stands as one of the most honest portrayals of childhood friendship ever put on film, showing how loss and loyalty shape who we become. When Harry Met Sally didn't just define romantic comedy, it reinvented it, proving love stories didn't need glamour, only truth. Critics, actors, and directors agreed Rob's genius was consistency. He cared about every frame and every performance. His sets were calm and focused. One collaborator said Rob made every actor feel like a partner, not a pawn. That's why his films still feel alive. They drew strength from real emotion, whether laughter, nostalgia, or heartbreak, connecting audiences to each other as much as to the story. Those closest to him also made sure to honor Michelle Singer Reiner, who preferred life away from the spotlight. Her presence shaped everything. She balanced fame with grace and strength, devoted to family and philanthropy, and supported causes centered on compassion and inclusion. Friends described Rob and Michelle as inseparable partners who built not just a family, but a legacy of love together. As tributes poured in, a haunting contrast emerged. Public celebration of Rob's legacy stood against the private heartbreak tearing his family apart. Grief and legacy became inseparable, unfolding side by side in real time. Their love story, tragedy, and fame had become inseparably intertwined. Public remembrance existed beside private devastation. Hollywood filled with tributes, emotional posts, and memorial moments, while behind closed doors, the Reiner family endured unbearable pain. Two realities unfolded at once.
one steeped in nostalgia, the other in heartbreak. As they ran parallel, the lines slowly blurred. Each new courtroom update twisted the story further. Prosecutors held firm, the defense pushed back harder. The mystery refused to settle. Whenever the truth seemed close, another detail or rumor dragged it back into uncertainty. Some whispered that new evidence was quietly under review, material that could shift the case entirely. Others hinted that one of the Reiner siblings may have privately shared information with investigators that hadn't yet surfaced. Whatever the truth is, it still feels just out of reach. Meanwhile, tributes across social media and studio lots stand as bittersweet reminders. Behind every headline were real people, not just icons, but parents, partners, and friends whose lives shaped generations. Their absence still echoes through Hollywood, their neighborhood, and the hearts of those who loved them. And as months pass and attention fades, one question refuses to disappear. What really happened inside that Brentwood home? Nick Reiner continues to maintain his innocence, insisting Roy knows more than she's saying. Roy stands firm that Nick is twisting the truth. The world remains divided, waiting to see which version will emerge. Now the question turns to you. What do you believe? Was Nick truly responsible? Or is there a missing piece no one has uncovered yet? Share your thoughts below. We'll keep digging into every twist. And if this story left you questioning everything, like, share, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood sagas. This story isn't over.